Okay, spacing is one of the key things that you will face when using Groovepages, and I believe if you will learn these key principles, you can save yourself a ton of headaches. Anybody who's been on the Q&A will tell you, oftentimes people will come and say, I can't get this thing where I want it to go. It's a huge, huge question, and we'll spend the time finding where the spacing went and putting it in the right place. So here's a couple of things that you need to know. On the spacing area, on the right-hand side on the style bar, we have padding. Padding will add space inside the element you have selected. I'm going to show you how this works. Padding's going to add space inside the constraints of the element that you are currently selected. So it could be a container, it could be a text element, it could be a button, it could be an image. You can put space inside of an image, which doesn't make sense, but I'm going to show you what that does. And it's important because if you're adding spacing and padding, you have a higher potential, this is my opinion, and hopefully it matters after 4 years of using Groove day in and day out. You have a higher potential for frustration if you're using padding. And I'm going to show you when you should use it and when you shouldn't use it. Padding quick tips. Use it minimally. By the way, I'm going to work at making this whole presentation downloadable as well. And anybody who came to the session, I will send you a link that you can download this. Select all of the areas you want to add space to. So one of the things that people don't realize is if you're adding padding, you can select the top and the bottom and add spacing at the same time. Don't use the slider. Be consistent every time you use padding on a block or a button. Okay, I'm going to show you how all that works. And by the way, I'm speeding through it because I want to get you this content in the next 5 minutes. Margin will add space outside of the element you have selected. So if you put spacing above an element, you'll push that element down the page. You're forcing spaces inside of or outside of the element. If you put it below, you're going to push the things below it down the page, and so it's outside. Real quickly, margin quick tips. Be consistent. This is one of the keys. Choose how you're going to do this, and then do it the same way every time, because I guarantee you're going to come back into that page at some point and you're going to want to change that spacing, and you don't want to spend your time searching around saying, where did I put the space? If you do the same thing every time, we push things down the page. You can do it however you want, but always do the same thing. Never use margin for blocks. There's an exception to that, but never use margin. Never put space outside of your block, because it is if you have colored blocks as an example, it's going to put white space between the blocks. You don't want to do that. And capital, exclamation point, never use spacing to center an element. Never use spacing to center an element. I'm going to show you how you do center an element. Okay, that's it. That's cool. We just did that. Let's go add an empty block. All right, so we have a block with an empty container. The first thing I'm going to do so we can see how this works is I'm going to put some spacing inside of the block at the top and the bottom. So you can see how I went to padding for inside of the block. And you'll notice before I do anything, we have white space, but the container is connected. It's touching the top and the bottom. So I'm going to put a little spacing in the padding. I'm going to put 100 actually so we can see it. All right, so now you can see that I added space in the padding inside of the block, which puts space on the top and the bottom inside the block. All right, so let's do something else. Let's change the background color so we can really see what's going on. So, all right, our background color, and you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to go do a plus and put another empty block in here, just so we can kind of clean up our screen a little bit. All right, there we go. So I just used spacing to clean up the screen. All right, so what we've got, it's got green background with an empty container inside of it. And the way I created the space, go over here to the spacing, is I put 100 padding on the top and the bottom, which put the space below the container and above the container over there on the left-hand side. Now, let me just give you a real quick tip here. You can change this spacing using the slider, but when you want to make a consistent website, you typically if you have spacing in your blocks, you want the same spacing for each one. And a much easier way than using the slider and crossing your fingers and hoping you can get that number, you see how the number's changing? You can literally just click on here and make it whatever you want. It's a much better way to do padding. But anyhow, that's how I added the space inside of the block. So that's one place where you do want to use padding, is inside of the block. Another thing that as a principle we do in our shop is we always add a little padding on the left and the right. And I'm going to show you in a minute why we do that. I'll leave it 0 for now. Okay, so let's go do something. Let's go to Elements and let's pull in an image into this empty container. And we're going to click on the image. And I know this is going to go fast, but I really am showing you spacing, not how to do images. Let's just grab this image and put it on the page. All right. So we've got a couple things going on here. You can see we have an image that's huge, but we also have an image that's not centered, right? And one of the principles that I said is never use spacing to center. This is I think the number one error that people make. And I'll show you why you don't use spacing. Let's say I went to spacing. I want to push it, so I put some spacing to the left of this element. I want to push it across the page till it's centered. All right, so first thing you'll realize, I'm guessing. I'm guessing at where the center is. So I'm eyeballing it. I don't know where the center is. The second thing you're going to see is when I push, let's say I put 300 in and I think, oh, that's centered, even though it doesn't look centered, right? Because we're not actually seeing the entire block, blah, blah, blah. What happened on mobile is I pushed it off the page. Because that same 300 spaces on mobile is not going to do what we wanted it to do on desktop. Right? It doesn't matter where we put it. It's not going to work. So now I'm frustrated because I want my image to be centered, and now mobile optimization doesn't work, right? That's a common thing that I hear. False. Mobile optimization works. Here's what you want to do. So first of all, I'm going to get rid of that space. And if you want to center an element, the exception is text. If you want to center an element, you click on the element. Breadcrumbs are your friend down here. So right now I have the image selected. I want the image centered. Go to the container that's holding it. So if you go to the left, you'll go to the container that's holding it. Let's go to layout. And I'm not going to go through what's the difference between vertical, horizontal, blah, blah, blah. I'll tell you the simple step. If you want to center an element, click vertical and then secondary, second from the left. This right here will center an element on your page. Let's go take a look at it. You see it's centered, and when I go to mobile, it's centered there as well. Now you also notice that it doesn't have space, and for me, I kind of always like to have things have space, text especially, and I don't like things right up against the edge of the screen. So what we do on a block, all right, so now I went to the block, is we will go put a little bit of space on the left and right. It can be as little as 10. You didn't see a change on desktop, but we do it here because we know that when they go to mobile, we're going to want a little space in there. So you're seeing padding versus, so in the block we have some padding. On the image, we have no spacing. And in order to center the image, we used layout. Probably the most important thing you can do is don't use spacing to center. And some of you are saying, well, if you change it on every screen, you can make it work. Yeah, but you just wasted time going screen by screen by screen to change the spacing to make it centered. Use the construct I just showed you. The layout on the container, vertical, secondary, second from the left. And if you are in the Groove for Growth Academy, I do go into detail for all of this, how all of this works. I'm just not going to do it today. That's the basic principle. Let's say that we have 2 images and a piece of text in here. So let's just go grab a header, put it in the middle there. Let's go make it large. All right. All right, so here's another principle. So let's say we want some space between image number 1, our heading, and image number 2. Here are all the ways you can do it, and then the one that I recommend. You can click on the text, you can go to spacing, and if you want to put some space at the top, you can put space in the padding, and you can see that you're creating space. We never do it that way. Again, it's about consistency. What we do is we always push elements down the page. So at the top, we have an image. I'm going to click on it for spacing. I'm going to go to the margin, not inside the image. By the way, you can put space inside of an image element, which is going to make things very confusing because the element allows you to do it, but it's a terrible thing to do. You can see that the little line is showing up there. You don't want space inside the element. What you want is space outside of this to push the heading down the page. So you watch when I add space, it's going to push that down the page. So let's say we're going to put 20 in there. Now we want to push this image, the second image, away from the heading. So we're going to go to spacing. Same thing every time. If I want spacing going down the page, I'm going to go to the bottom of the element above, and I'm going to push it down the page with spacing. The simple principles, but they will help you be much more effective in your page building.